Pick it up." The words cut sharper than the shards on the floor. A plate had just slipped from his hand, porcelain shattering across the restaurant's marble like a gunshot. Every head turned. The lunch rush froze mid-bite. Forks hovered. Whispers spread, and standing right in front of him, a woman in a white suit, the CEO whose table he'd been serving, stared with the kind of disgust that burns hotter than rage. He bent down immediately, apologizing under his breath, but his shaking hands only made the pieces clink louder. One jagged edge nicked his palm. A drop of blood hit the floor. The CEO crossed her arms. "Unbelievable. Can you even manage a tray without breaking it?" Her voice carried just enough for the room to hear. His manager stepped forward but froze, torn between saving face and saving his job. The waiter didn't look up. He just kept gathering the pieces like a man trying to put his dignity back together. When he finally placed the broken halves on the counter, the CEO snapped, "You'll pay for that plate out of your tips." He nodded quietly, pulling the bill folder from his apron, the same one that held everything from receipts to notes for his daughter's medicine. But as he slipped the broken ceramic inside, something odd fell out. A small folded paper wrapped in tape, once hidden inside the hollow base of the plate. The CEO frowned. "What's that?" He froze. That paper shouldn't have been there, at least not in this plate. She picked it up before he could stop her. Her irritation softened into curiosity as she slowly unfolded it. The handwriting was childish, shaky but bright. "Daddy's Dream Restaurant." A drawing. Crayon colors bleeding through the creases. A counter. A smile. A little girl in a chef's hat. The room stayed silent. The CEO blinked, the insult fading from her lips as she whispered, "What is this?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know how to explain why a broken plate had just exposed the part of him he'd kept hidden all along. And for her it was only the beginning. The morning after the incident, he wakes before dawn, not because of an alarm, but because the coughing starts again. A soft, dry sound from the small bed beside his. "Easy, sweetheart," he whispers, holding a cup of water to her lips. The girl, barely 8, tries to smile through it. "I'm okay, Daddy," she says, but her voice trembles. He checks her temperature with the back of his hand. Warm again. The medicine bottle on the table is almost empty. He tilts it, one last dose left. Rent's due in 2 days. His next paycheck won't cover both. He doesn't even want to think about it. The kettle whistles softly. He pours himself cheap instant coffee and stares at the faded notice pinned to the fridge. A letter from the university he once attended. Architecture department. He got the scholarship once. The kind of thing people framed. Now it's just a reminder of everything he couldn't finish. He takes out his uniform, crisp white shirt, black tie, both washed thin. As he irons, his daughter draws on scrap paper at the table. "Look, Daddy," she says, holding up a sketch of a smiling chef behind a counter. Above it, in pink crayon, "Daddy's Dream Restaurant." He freezes for a moment, the sound of the iron humming behind him. That same drawing, the one that fell out of the broken plate yesterday. "Where'd you find that?" he asks gently. She shrugs, shyly proud. "I made a new one. Like before. You said someday you'll cook your own food. Remember?" He smiles faintly, though the words sting.
"Yeah."
Someday. He doesn't tell her that someday now feels like fiction. At the restaurant, the rhythm of survival continues. Orders shouted, trays balanced, smiles forced. The other waiters gossip in whispers. They all saw what happened. One pats his shoulder. Another avoids eye contact. He doesn't blame them. Pity feels heavier than judgment. During lunch break, his manager calls him aside. "You're lucky she didn't report you," the man says. "That CEO? She's not the forgiving kind. Just stay quiet, all right?" He nods, gripping the edge of the counter. Stay quiet. That's what he's been doing for years. In his pocket, he keeps the folded drawing the CEO left behind. She must have forgotten it after the incident. He doesn't know why he kept it. Maybe because it feels like the only proof that something pure still exists between all this noise. That night, when he returns home, his daughter's asleep. The flicker of a small lamp paints soft light across her face. He sits by her bedside, looking at the pills lined neatly in their tray, half doses to make them last. His fingers trace the edges of the crayon paper again. He whispers, almost to himself, "I used to draw buildings, now I can't even build a future." His wife's photograph watches from the wall, a simple frame, her smile frozen in time. She used to tell him he was meant to build things that make people feel safe. He believed her once, but life dismantled that belief brick by brick. First the bills, then the sickness, then the silence that followed her death. He rubs his tired eyes. The echo of the CEO's insult still lingers in his mind. Can you even manage a tray without breaking it? Funny thing, he thinks. He used to manage blueprints, dreams, ideas bigger than trays. The ceiling fan turns lazily. Outside, sirens hum in the distance. Inside, he feels the same stillness he's carried for years, the kind that comes when you stop expecting good news. He looks down at his hands, rough, scarred, smelling faintly of soap and dishwater, and whispers to the empty room, maybe this is all I'm good for now. But somewhere in the quiet, the paper crinkles in his pocket, that fragile, colorful sketch of a dream that refuses to die. He doesn't know it yet, but the same picture that once symbolized failure is about to become the key that changes both their lives. The call comes 2 days after the broken plate. He's in the middle of stacking dishes when his manager walks over. Face tight. Office. Now. The CEO wants to see you. His first thought is finally fired. He unties his apron, wipes his hands, and walks down the hallway that always smells faintly of bleach and perfume. Every step feels heavier. When he enters, she's there, seated across the small staff meeting table, dressed sharp, composed, unreadable. The same woman whose voice had cut through him like glass that afternoon. Sit, she says simply. He lowers himself into the chair, eyes on the floor. I thought you might want this back, she says, sliding something across the table. It's the drawing, the one that fell from the plate, crinkled, still creased. He reaches for it quietly. Thank you, ma'am. There's a pause. Then, who drew it? My daughter, he answers. She's young? 8. She nods slowly, eyes lingering on the childish handwriting. It's beautiful. He doesn't know if she means it or if it's a polite reflex. He doesn't look up. It's just a drawing. Something in his tone makes her tilt her head. Just a drawing, she repeats softly. You don't sound like a man who believes that. He stays silent. Finally, she leans back, crossing her arms. You studied design, didn't you? His eyes flicker up. How do you... I saw your file, the application you filled when you joined the restaurant. You listed architecture school. He swallows, suddenly uncomfortable. That was a long time ago. And yet you still carry this. She gestures to the drawing. He doesn't have an answer for that. I have a proposal, she says finally, her voice shifting to the cool precision of business. My company is launching a community cafe initiative. Low-cost meals, vocational training, that sort of thing. We're calling it a social responsibility project. He waits, unsure why she's telling him this. I saw the way you handled that situation, she continues. You didn't argue, didn't lash out. You just absorbed it. I need someone like that, someone who knows what Yule feels like, to help us design a place that actually means something. He blinks, not sure he heard right. You want me to design something? Conceptual input, she clarifies. We already have architects, but they lack heart. You've lived what this project represents. He lets out a small, humorless laugh. Ma'am, I'm a waiter. I don't belong in boardrooms. Maybe not, she says, her tone steady. But belonging isn't the same as deserving. He doesn't understand her motives, whether it's genuine or guilt. It feels like pity wrapped in professionalism, but when she slides a small envelope across the table, the doubt fades beneath something more practical. An advance, she says, for your time. We start next week if you agree. He hesitates, fingers hovering above the envelope. Why me? She looks at him evenly. Because when that plate broke, everyone looked away. You didn't. You kept working. People who can rebuild under judgment, they make better foundations. The words hang between them. For a moment, he sees something almost human behind her authority. Not softness, but memory. Like she knows what breaking feels like too. He nods slowly. All right, I'll help, but only if it's real, not just a PR stunt. Her expression flickers. Surprise, maybe respect. Fair enough. He stands to leave, tucking the drawing into his pocket. As he reaches the door, she adds quietly, by the way, you never told me her name. He turns back. Mira. The CEO repeats it softly, as if testing the sound. Tell Mira, her father just got promoted. He doesn't smile. Not yet. He's still not sure if this is opportunity or another kind of trap. That evening he brings home groceries, a luxury they haven't had in weeks. Mira claps her hands when she sees them. Did you get a bonus? She asks. Something like that, he says. He cooks her favorite soup, pretending not to notice when she hides a cough. For one evening the air feels lighter. After she falls asleep, he sits by the window, the city lights blinking outside like small promises. He opens the envelope. The money is real. Enough for medicine. Maybe. He unfolds her drawing again and traces the lines. Maybe this isn't pity, he tells himself. Maybe it's fate giving him one last test. But in his chest, a quieter thought lingers. People like him don't get second chances without paying a price. And as he closes his eyes that night, he can't tell whether he's walking into an opportunity or another humiliation waiting to happen. Let's keep this brief, one of the executives said, tapping his pen against the glass table. We've got real deadlines. It was his first day in the CEO's building, a place where everything gleamed too much, too white, too quiet. Even the coffee smelled expensive. He sat at the far end, trying not to look out of place. His worn shirt and borrowed laptop stood out like bruises in a room full of tailored perfection. The CEO walked in last, tablet in hand, her tone clipped but polite. Everyone, this is Armin. He'll be consulting with us on the Community Cafe initiative. A few polite smiles, a few raised eyebrows. Someone whispered, the waiter, before hiding a smirk behind their hand. She ignored it. He brings perspective we lack. Let's listen. Armin opened the folder he'd prepared. Sketches done on cheap paper, his best attempt to make something worthy of her trust. He spread them on the table. I thought maybe the cafe could be designed around warmth. Not luxury, but dignity. People shouldn't feel like they're getting charity. One man leaned back, scoffing. You mean like a poor people's Starbucks? Laughter rippled around the room. Armin forced a smile, throat tightening. No, sir, I mean something that feels equal. The same chairs, same service, just affordable. Maybe add a small reading corner, some light music. A younger designer cut him off. That's cute, she said, voice dripping with condescension. But we're working on brand alignment, not bedtime stories. The words landed harder than they should have. He'd faced insults before, but this felt different, slower, deliberate, polished humiliation dressed as humor. He looked to the CEO. She was scrolling through her tablet, expression unreadable. Not once did she step in. He continued anyway, voice smaller now. People eat differently when they feel seen. If we design for seen, another executive interrupted. We're not running a therapy center. It's a cafe, not a shelter. More laughter. Armin gathered his papers quietly. Maybe I misunderstood the project, he said. You did, the man replied flatly. The meeting ended abruptly. He left before anyone could see the redness in his eyes. In the hallway, a PR assistant stopped him. Sir, I just wanted to say I think your ideas. He smiled weakly. It's all right, you don't have to pretend. By lunchtime, the whispers had already started. Someone had found his old social media account, a picture of Mira in a hospital bed from months ago. The caption read, "One more treatment to go, we'll get there." Now it was circulating in the company group chat with pitying comments. He's doing this for sympathy. No wonder she hired him, PR gold. He saw the post by accident when he passed a screen in the break area. His stomach dropped. He didn't even have the strength to get angry. Just tired. Back at the meeting room, the CEO stood near the window, talking to a reporter. Her tone was calm, professional. He thought she'd call him in, maybe say something, anything to stop it. She didn't even glance his way. He realized then, to her, he was still just the man who dropped a plate. A convenient story, not a person. When he got home that evening, Mira greeted him with her usual joy. How was work, Daddy? He forced a smile. Busy. Important people. Long day. She giggled. You're important too. He wanted to believe her, but all he could hear was the laughter echoing from that room. Cute. Charity. The waiter. After she fell asleep, he sat on the balcony with the city lights below, so many windows glowing with lives that didn't include him. He pulled out his phone, opened the message thread with the CEO and typed, "Thank you for the opportunity. I think it's better if I step away from the project." He stared at the screen for a long time before pressing send. Her reply came hours later. Understood. No defense, no apology, just business. He deleted the conversation, closed his eyes and let the silence settle around him. For a man who had already lost everything once, he hadn't realized there was still room left to fall. Tomorrow, he'd go back to being invisible again. Or so he thought. The next morning, he didn't get out of bed when the alarm rang. The sound just kept going until it stopped on its own. Mira was the one who woke him, small fingers tapping his arm. "Daddy, you'll be late." He opened his eyes slowly, the ceiling spinning in faint circles above him. His body felt heavy, like the world had added weight overnight. I'm not going in today, he said quietly. Her face scrunched with worry. Did you get in trouble again? He smiled faintly. No, sweetheart. Just taking a break. She climbed onto the bed beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. That's okay. You work too hard anyway. He turned to her, half smiling. You sound like your mother. The word mother hung in the air, a name too sacred to say often. He reached for the nightstand drawer, pulling out the folded drawing again. Do you still remember when you made this? Mira nodded. You said someday we'll have our own restaurant. I'll make cupcakes, and you'll make everything else. He chuckled softly. That's a lot of cooking. She beamed. We'll have helpers, nice ones, no shouting. His chest tightened. No shouting. He thought of the boardroom laughter, the way they'd talked over him like noise. Yeah, he whispered, no shouting. She leaned against him, humming quietly to herself. A song he didn't recognize, but one she always sang when she wanted to make him feel better. When she left for school, the apartment fell silent again. The kind of silence that hums in your ears, thick and slow. He sat on the couch, staring at the envelope from the CEO still lying on the table. The money was half spent. Groceries, medicine, rent, everything practical, nothing left for dreams. He opened his phone. No messages. Not from the manager. Not from her. The world had already moved on. At noon he made tea and poured it into the cracked cup he'd been using for years. The handle was chipped, but it still held warmth. He thought of the plate. How one small crack had exposed everything. Maybe people were the same. Maybe we all had something fragile hiding inside, waiting to be seen only when we broke. He picked up a pen and tried to sketch again. A habit from another life. His hand trembled. The lines didn't flow anymore. They felt forced. He tore the paper and threw it away. Outside, the city was alive. Car horns, vendors, footsteps. Inside, everything stayed still. Across town, the CEO sat alone in her corner office, phone turned face down, laptop closed. The usual rhythm of meetings and numbers felt distant. Her team had moved on from the cafe project for now. They were drafting new press releases, running damage control, but she couldn't. She kept replaying that moment in her mind. His voice, quiet but firm, when he said, "Maybe I misunderstood the project." The way he'd packed his papers in silence while others laughed. She hadn't stopped them. She hadn't even looked up. At the time it had felt easier, keeping her distance, staying professional. But now that same distance felt like cowardice. She turned toward the window. The city skyline stretched endlessly, full of buildings that bore her company's logo. Her father had always told her, success means control. But lately she wondered if control had cost her something she couldn't name. On her desk lay the framed prototype of the cafe brochure, Community Through Compassion. She laughed bitterly. Compassion. What a convenient word for a press release. She picked up her phone, scrolling through messages until she found his name. Armand. She typed a few words, then erased them, typed again, deleted again. What could she even say? Sorry I let them treat you like that. Sorry I used your story to feel moral. She placed the phone down and exhaled, leaning back in her chair. For the first time in years, the silence in her office didn't feel like peace. It felt like guilt. Meanwhile, at the apartment, Mira returned from school holding a small box, paper, glue, and stickers. We made models today, she said proudly. I made one of our restaurant. He smiled weakly as she placed it in his lap. Crooked walls, bright windows, a tiny paper sign that said Daddy's Dream. She looked at him with that pure confidence only children have. It's waiting for you to finish it, Daddy. He felt his throat tighten. Maybe one day. But she shook her head. Firm, not one day. Soon. He hugged her quietly, her hair smelling like crayons in sunlight. Later, when she slept, he sat by the window again, the toy restaurant on the table beside him. He looked out at the night and whispered to no one. She still believed. Across the city, the CEO turned off the lights in her office, the same words echoing differently in her mind. He still believed enough to show up. Neither of them knew it yet, but that shared unease, his quiet despair, her restless guilt, was the invisible bridge already forming between them. And soon life would find a way to make them meet again. The hospital corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and lilies, the kind of scent that always made the CEO uneasy. She wasn't supposed to be here long. Just a short photo visit for the company's donation program. Hand over a check, shake hands, smile for the cameras, and leave before it got emotional. That was the plan. Her assistant led the way. This ward supports underprivileged children with chronic illnesses, he whispered. The PR team will arrive in 10. She nodded absently, half listening. Her heels clicked sharply against the tiled floor, a sound too loud for a place like this. She slowed her pace, instinctively lowering her voice. As they turned a corner, she noticed a nurse carrying a tray of soup into one of the rooms. Room 217. The nurse paused at the doorway and smiled. He's already got it covered. Curiosity flickered. The CEO glanced through the half-open door and froze. Inside, Armin sat beside a hospital bed, feeding a little girl with careful patience. She was pale but bright-eyed, talking non-stop as he tried to get her to eat. Her small voice filled the room like sunlight sneaking through curtains. And when we open our restaurant, she was saying between spoonfuls, we'll have cupcakes with stars on top, and a sign that says everyone's welcome. He laughed softly. Even the ones who don't like cupcakes? Especially them, she said with mock seriousness. They need it most. The CEO couldn't move. She stood at the doorway, unseen, something heavy shifting inside her chest. The same drawing she'd once mocked silently was pinned above the girl's bed. Daddy's dream restaurant, the rayon colors fading but still vivid. Armin wiped the girl's chin with a napkin, his movements slow, gentle, a rhythm learned from love, not duty. There was no bitterness in his face, no trace of the humiliation she'd left him with, just quiet endurance. For a moment she forgot about PR, about schedules, about her world of control. She saw a father who had nothing but gave everything anyway. The nurse noticed her standing there. "Are you here for the donation event, ma'am?" she asked softly. He turned at the sound, and their eyes met. His surprise was immediate, but he didn't stand. He just looked at her, guarded but polite. "Ma'am." She stepped inside, unsure what to say. The girl looked between them curiously. "Daddy, is she your friend?" He hesitated. "She's my boss. Or she was." The CEO managed a small smile. "Hello, Mira. Your dad told me about you." The girl grinned. "He did? He says I talk too much." He chuckled quietly. "That's true." The moment was fragile, awkward yet strangely warm. The CEO placed the donation envelope on the side table. "We came to support the hospital. I didn't know you were here." He nodded once. "Mira's been on treatment here for a while." She looked around the small bare room, the sketch pinned to the wall, the folded clothes stacked neatly in a corner, the worn jacket on the chair. Everything about the space spoke of survival held together by love. Something twisted inside her. Guilt, admiration, maybe both. "You never told me," she said quietly. He met her gaze evenly. "Didn't think it mattered." She exhaled, the words she'd rehearsed dying in her throat. "It does. I handled things badly. I should have." She stopped, struggling to find the right word. "List." For a second, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint beeping of the monitor beside the bed. Then Mira broke the silence, her voice innocent but piercing. "Daddy, is this about your cafe again?" The CEO blinked. "Your cafe?" Mira nodded eagerly.
"Yeah, Daddy was helping you make a restaurant for everyone."
He showed me the drawings. They were so good. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mira." But the girl kept going, her excitement unstoppable. "You should let him finish it. He makes everything nice. Even our noodles look fancy when he cooks." The CEO laughed softly, genuinely this time. "Is that true?" He smiled despite himself. "She exaggerates." "Maybe not enough," the CEO said quietly. She took a deep breath. "I came here for business, but maybe that's not what this visit was for." She looked at him, her voice steady now. "Come back. Help me finish the project properly. No PR tricks, no pity. Just build something real, like you wanted." He frowned slightly, uncertain. "Why now?" "Because I saw what I didn't before," she said simply. "What dignity looks like when no one's watching." He didn't respond right away. The offer hung in the air, fragile but sincere. Mira looked up at him with wide eyes. "Daddy, say yes. You always say we should finish what we start." He chuckled weakly. "You remember everything, don't you? Everything important." He turned back to the CEO. "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Take your time. But the offer stands." As she left the room, she glanced one last time at the drawing on the wall. For the first time, she didn't see a childish sketch. She saw blueprints of something her money could never buy. Grace. Later that night, Armin sat beside Mira's bed after she'd fallen asleep. Her words echoed in his mind. "Finish what you start." He looked at her peaceful face and knew the answer before he even realized it. Maybe some things weren't meant to end in shame. Maybe this was his one chance to rebuild. not for pride, but for her. The next morning, he drafted a short message. "I'll help. Let's build it right this time." Across the city, when the CEO read it, she allowed herself a small smile. Two people on opposite sides of power, both finally taking the first quiet step toward redemption. When he returned to her office a week later, something felt different. The same polished glass doors, the same clean scent of professionalism. Yet this time, there was no audience, no laughter, no judgment. Just her standing by the conference table with 2 cups of coffee. "I thought we could start fresh," she said. He nodded quietly. Fresh sounds good. There was no grand apology, no dramatic gesture. But the absence of mockery, the calm sincerity in her voice was apology enough. Over the next few weeks they met almost every day. At first the work was stiff. She led with spreadsheets. He spoke in hesitant suggestions. But slowly, the rhythm changed. He began sketching freely again. Diagrams of open spaces, circular seating, play areas for kids. He explained the psychology behind them, how people feel safer when they can see one another, how laughter spreads faster in cave rooms. She listened, really listened for the first time. Sometimes she'd ask, "Why this color?" or "Why not use the cheaper layout?" And he'd answer with quiet conviction, explaining how even essential details could restore dignity to those who'd lost it. One afternoon she asked, "Do you ever miss architecture?" He paused, pencil hovering over paper. "Every day, but missing it doesn't feed my daughter." The room went still for a moment. Then she said softly, "You're building something again now, aren't you?" He looked up, and for the first time in a long time smiled without hesitation. "Maybe I am." Their conversations began drifting beyond the project. Between sketches and meetings, they traded small stories about her childhood summers, his first kitchen job, the recipe his wife used to make when Mira couldn't sleep. One evening she stayed late to finish a report. He noticed her staring at an old photograph on her desk, a younger version of her, arm around an older man. "Your father?" he asked gently. She nodded. "He built this company from nothing. I grew up thinking ambition was love, that if I kept climbing I'd reach him somehow." He said nothing, only listened. She looked down at her hands. "He passed away before I ever stopped climbing." Silence filled the space, not awkward, but understanding. Two people quietly realizing how failure wears different faces. The cafe design began to evolve. What started as a corporate community project became something deeper, a blueprint for healing disguised as architecture. They decided to center the cafe around single parents, offering flexible shifts, free child care, and a warm environment for families who lived on the edge of exhaustion. She suggested naming it The Bridge. He said, "Because bridges connect." She smiled. "Because they hold weight quietly." Together they walked through empty lots where the cafe would rise. He crouched on the ground, sketching outlines in the dust, while she held the corner of his rough paper against the wind. For the first time she wasn't the one commanding, she was helping. He noticed the change in her. The clipped authority had softened into patience. When her team disagreed, she didn't snap. She listened, like she'd learned from him that leadership wasn't about volume but presence, and she noticed change in him too. The man who once flinched at every mistake now stood straighter, his voice steadier. When an engineer dismissed one of his suggestions, he calmly defended it, not from pride but from purpose. One afternoon, while reviewing material samples, she asked, "Why do you care so much about small details like how wide the counters are?" He smiled faintly. "Because people notice small things when life has taken big ones from them. A little space, a soft light, a chair that doesn't wobble. It tells them they're ready." She looked at him for a long moment, realizing that he wasn't just talking about furniture. That evening, they worked late again. She offered to drive him home, but he declined. "Mira's waiting. She worries if I'm late." Before he left, she hesitated. "Can I meet her sometime?" He smiled, surprised. "She'd probably interview you about the cafe before letting you in." "Good," she said. "I could use a tough critic." Days turned into weeks, and the project's walls began to rise. He started bringing Mira to the site on weekends. She'd run between the scaffolding, handing out imaginary orders to invisible customers. One day the CEO arrived unexpectedly. Mira froze, unsure how to act. Then the woman crouched down to her level. "I hear you're the one with all the good ideas," she said. Mira giggled shyly. "I just make sure Daddy doesn't forget the cupcakes." The CEO smiled, something unguarded lighting her face. "Then we'll need a cupcake section, non-negotiable." Armin watched, amazed at how easily she fit into their small world. No titles, No distance. Just a person. That night after dropping Mira home, he found a message from her on his phone. "You were right. Dignity is in the details." He read it twice, then looked over at Mira asleep with her sketchbook still open. In it she had drawn 3 figures this time, herself, him and the CEO, all standing under a sign that said Daddy's Dream Cafe. He smiled. "Looks like we're getting promoted," he whispered. In her office across town, the CEO sat by the window sipping tea instead of wine for once. The city lights blurred below her, but her mind was clear. She realized that somewhere between drawings and deadlines, something had shifted. The project wasn't her redemption anymore. It was theirs. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone at the top. She felt connected. And in that quiet connection, power gave way to empathy, control gave way to trust. 2 broken worlds finally learning how to build one together. The cafe was almost ready. Fresh paint still clung to the air, sunlight spilling across the counter where Armin had carved tiny initials, M.P.A.S.D. just beneath the ledge. He stood there that morning, looking around proudly. For the first time in years, his hands had built something that wasn't just survival. The CEO walked in moments later, carrying coffee for 2. "We did it," she said simply. He smiled. "Almost. Just needs laughter now." She looked at him, the exhaustion behind her eyes softening into something like peace. "You really think they'll come?" "They will," he said. "People always come where they feel welcome." But outside that quiet moment, forces neither of them saw were already moving. At headquarters, whispers started early. Emails about irregular fund transfers, anonymous tips to the board, a few missing receipts, a number that didn't match. Someone had been planting seeds for weeks. Her rival, the chief operations director, a man named Rihan, had long resented her shift from profits to purpose. "You're turning this company into a charity," he'd once sneered, "and when it collapses, you'll have no one to blame but sentiment." Now he had found his weapon. When she arrived for the final budget review, the boardroom was unusually full, faces she knew too well, cautious, judgmental. Rihan slid a folder across the table. "We've discovered something concerning," he said. Inside were bank statements and wire transfers, large amounts labeled as community project expense, with her signature attached. Only she hadn't signed them. Her brows furrowed. "This isn't possible. I never approved." Rihan interrupted smoothly. "The transfers went directly to the vendor contracted under the cafe project. The same vendor your consultant coordinated with." She went still. "Our man—" "Yes, a waiter-turned-designer suddenly managing thousands in project funds. Convenient, isn't it?" Murmurs rippled through the room. "That's absurd," she said sharply. "He doesn't even have access to those accounts." Rihan leaned back, a faint smirk on his lips. "Then you won't mind an investigation." The next morning, Armin arrived at the cafe site as usual, but the mood had shifted. Workers whispered. Phones lit up with headlines. "Corporate charity scandal. CEO and former waiter under fire for embezzlement. Funds missing from community project." By the time he reached the office, 2 uniformed security guards were waiting. "Sir, you'll need to come with us," one said flatly. He looked around in confusion. "What's going on?" "Orders from management." He saw her through the glass wall, standing rigid, surrounded by lawyers. Their eyes met across the distance. For a moment he thought she'd stop them, but she didn't. Her silence felt colder than any accusation. The guards led him out through the main lobby. People watched, whispering. Some recognized him from the viral news posts. Others just stared at the spectacle. A reporter's voice shouted from the crowd. "Is it true you helped steal donation money?" He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. He just kept walking, the echo of footsteps loud against the marble. The last time he'd been humiliated publicly, he'd dropped a plate. This time, he was the one being shattered. No. That evening the story reached Mira before he could stop it. She was sitting on their couch, phone glowing in her small hands, tears already streaking down her cheeks. "Daddy, they said you stole money, that you lied." He knelt in front of her, voice trembling. "No, sweetheart, it's not true. Someone made a mistake." Her lip quivered. "Will they take you away?" He pulled her close, holding her as she cried into his shoulder. "No one's taking me anywhere, I promise." But promises felt fragile now, like paper soaked in rain. After she fell asleep, he sat in the dark, staring at his reflection in the window. The cafe sign he'd designed, the bridge, was still taped on the wall behind him. How cruelly ironic, he thought, that something meant to connect had become a weapon to destroy. Across the city, the CEO sat alone in her apartment. her phone buzzing with calls she didn't answer. The board had suspended her pending investigation. Rehan had taken temporary control to protect company integrity. She scrolled through the article, her photo beside his, headlines twisting compassion into corruption. Her chest ached, not from anger, but from the look she'd seen in his eyes when the guards took him away, disbelief and betrayal, like she'd turned her silence into a verdict. Her assistant called again. "Ma'am, should I issue a statement?" She hesitated. "No, not yet." "But the board," I said no. She hung up, breathing hard. For the first time in her career, she had no words to defend herself, because deep down, she wasn't sure if silence had made her complicit. She opened her drawer, pulling out the child's drawing she'd kept. Daddy's dream restaurant. The edges were frayed, the colors faint. She traced the lines with her finger. "This wasn't supposed to hurt him," she whispered. The city outside continued as if nothing had happened, lights flashing, cars passing, the world indifferent.
Ma.
Days blurred into one another. He avoided the news. She stopped going to work. The cafe remained unfinished, its doors locked, scaffolding left to gather dust. Mira stopped asking questions. She just drew more pictures, all of them of bridges. When he asked her why, she said quietly, "Because bridges don't fall, Daddy, even when people walk away from them." He didn't have the heart to tell her that sometimes they do. And in a different apartment across the skyline, the CEO watched the same headline on repeat, the same questions replaying in her mind. When did doing good start looking like a crime? Somewhere deep down, both of them knew. This wasn't the end. But it felt like one. The silence between them, once healing, had become a wall again. One built from betrayal, shame, and things left unsaid. And behind that wall both waited unknowingly for truth to break through. The night she decided to fight back, the city was wrapped in fog. Her apartment was dark except for the faint blue light from her laptop screen. The company's server login blinked in the corner. Unauthorized access may result in termination. She hesitated only once before typing her credentials. They had taken her title, her office, her voice, but not her conscience. For hours she combed through archives of invoices, vendor contracts and emails. Her eyes burned, her fingers numb. Every document looked clean, every signature perfect, until she noticed something small. A pattern. The same timestamp appeared on 3 major fund transfers, the exact minute she had been in a meeting across town. And all 3 authorizations carried her digital signature. She zoomed in, then froze. The curve of the S in her name was slightly different. Her real signature curved upward. This one dipped down. A forged flourish, subtle, but unmistakable to her trained eye. She cross-checked the vendor account tied to those payments. Registered to a shell company, RK Holdings. Her pulse quickened. The initials Roshan Khan. It wasn't proof yet, but it was the crack she needed. She opened her contacts and scrolled through numbers she hadn't used in months, stopping at one. Anika, accounts intern. The youngest voice on her team, always quiet but observant. When the girl picked up, her voice trembled. "Ma'am."
It's me. Don't say my name. I need to know if anyone asked you to alter invoices.
A pause, then a whisper.
Yes.
"Mr. Rehan told me to backdate approvals for the cafe project. He said it was just for alignment, but when I asked again he told me to delete the email trail." The CEO closed her eyes. "Do you still have copies?" A shaky breath. "I saved screenshots. I didn't trust him." "Send them to me," she said, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. "And Annika, you did the right thing." Across the city, Armin sat by his window staring at the unfinished sketch of the Bridge Cafe. His phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. "I'm so sorry. I know you didn't do anything wrong. I worked on the budget team. They made Rasane's people change the vendor logs. Please don't give up." He read it 3 times, the words blurring. For days he'd believed the world had turned its back on him, that his name would forever be tied to a crime he hadn't committed. But now, this single message cracked open a possibility he'd stopped believing in. Maybe the truth hadn't forgotten him. He stood abruptly pacing the small apartment. Mira, half asleep on the couch, stirred. "Daddy, what's wrong?" He turned, forcing calm into his voice. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just, something important came up." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Is it about the cafe?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah. Maybe it's not over." Her face lit up. "I told you bridges don't fall." He laughed softly, the first real laugh in weeks. "You did." "What?" The next morning, He wrote a short message to the CEO. I received a lead. Someone inside knows what really happened. I'll share it if you still care to fix this. He didn't expect a reply, but 10 minutes later, one came. I already found proof. Meet me at the bridge tonight. The cafe sat silent under a gray evening sky. Dust had settled on the counters, the once bright paint dulled by time. But as they stepped inside, two exiles from the same betrayal, something about the unfinished walls still felt alive. She was already there, papers spread across a table. Her expression was calm, determined. I can prove the transfers were forged, she said, handing him a folder. Rehan used my credentials, and yours as the scapegoat. He flipped through the files, each one tightening the knot in his chest. He turned our work into his weapon. She nodded. Greed always does. He looked up at her. Why tell me? You could clear your name alone. Her gaze didn't waver. Because clearing mine means clearing yours. We started this together. We finish it together. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, rain began to fall softly, tapping against the windows like a quiet rhythm of resolve. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I kept something from you, she said. Your daughter's drawing. I framed it. He blinked. Framed it? In my office. Before everything fell apart. I used to look at it when I forgot why this project mattered. He swallowed hard. Why keep it? Because I needed a reminder that not everything broken stays that way. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition deeper than gratitude. He finally said, we take this to the board. She nodded. Tomorrow, with Annika's statement in these files. They can't bury it. He exhaled slowly. You know they'll come after you again. She smiled faintly. Let them. I've already lost everything worth keeping, except my integrity. That's one thing I don't delegate. He looked around the half-finished cafe. The chairs still wrapped in plastic, the empty shelves waiting for life. Feels like we're both rebuilding from rubble. Then let's start with truth, she said. Yeah. That night, she returned home and placed the drawing on her desk once more. Under the soft lamplight, the crayon colors glowed. Daddy's dream restaurant. She noticed something she'd never seen before. The child had drawn a tiny bridge above the door. A connection. A crossing. She smiled. Of course. Across town, Armin folded the message from the intern into his wallet. Beside a photo of Mira, he didn't sleep much. His mind replayed every moment, every insult, every silence that had brought him here. But for once, the replay didn't sting. It steadied him. Tomorrow, they would walk back into the same boardroom that once broke them. Not as boss and employee, not as charity case and benefactor, but as equals bound by truth. And somewhere deep inside, both knew, this time, the silence wouldn't protect anyone. Tomorrow, the bridge would rise again. The morning of the cafe's reopening arrived under a sky that seemed to hesitate between storm and sunlight. News vans lined the street. Banners fluttered with the company's logo beside a large sign that read, The Bridge Cafe, Grand Opening. It was meant to be a celebration of charity and renewal, another polished PR spectacle. But for the CEO standing behind the velvet curtain, heart pounding against her ribs, it wasn't a celebration at all. It was Judgment Day. The board had reinstated her only on the condition that she publicly clarify the company's integrity after the scandal. Rehan, smug as ever, stood by the podium rehearsing lines about transparency and teamwork. He didn't know that by the end of the day, those same words would undo him. She watched the guests trickle in. Press, donors, government officials, all waiting for a feel-good story. She spotted Armin near the back, standing quietly with Mira. He wore the same modest clothes as always, but his posture carried something new, steadiness. Mira clutched his hand, eyes wide at the crowd. Their gaze met across the hall. For a moment the noise around them disappeared. He nodded once, silent reassurance. She nodded back. The host tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our CEO and her team to inaugurate the Bridge Cafe. A project born from compassion and vision. Applause filled the space. Cameras flashed. She stepped onto the stage, the bright lights hot against her face. Rehan stood beside her, grinning for the cameras. She looked at him, then at the crowd. And something inside her shifted. Her prepared speech waited on the podium, every word approved by the board. Safe, hollow, false. She folded the paper once, then set it aside. Before we begin, she said, voice steady, there's something you deserve to know. The murmurs started immediately. Rehan's grin faltered. She continued, eyes scanning the audience. Months ago, this project nearly died before it even opened. Not because it lacked purpose, but because it made some people uncomfortable. Because it reminded us that power without conscience is just corruption in disguise. A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Rehan stepped forward, whispering urgently, "Stick to the script." She didn't even glance at him. When funds went missing, I was blamed, and so was the man who helped design this cafe. A man many of you probably saw in the headlines. The crowd went quiet. Somewhere near the back, a camera light blinked red, live feed broadcasting every word. He was called a fraud, a thief, all because he didn't have the right title, the right suit, the right pedigree. She paused. But truth doesn't ask for credentials. Rehan's face turned pale. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. She turned the microphone slightly toward him. "I'm doing what I should have done the day I stayed silent." Gasps filled the hall. She reached into the folder in front of her and held up printed screenshots, documents with highlighted signatures, emails, timestamps. "These are the transfers forged under my name," she said clearly. "And these are the accounts they were sent to, owned by RK Holdings." Every head turned toward Rehan. His initials. He stammered, "This is absurd, you can't." She raised her hand. "Security, please escort Mr. Khan to the conference room. The auditors have been waiting." Two officers stepped forward, cameras swiveled. Rewasan sputtered protests, his voice drowned by the commotion. But the CEO's tone remained calm, almost sorrowful. The truth always waits. Even buried under lies, it finds air eventually. The reporters surged forward, microphones flashing. "Who is the man you mentioned? The one accused with you?" She took a breath, turning toward the back of the hall. "He's here today." Armin froze as dozens of eyes turned to him. Mira gripped his hand tighter. Armin, the CEO called softly, "Would you come forward?" For a moment he hesitated. Years of humiliation, of being told he didn't belong, rose like ghosts behind him. But then he felt the tiny hand in his steady, trusting. He walked to the stage. As he approached, the CEO stepped aside, giving him space. "This," she said to the audience, "is the man who helped build this place, not with wealth or influence, but with patience and faith." He looked out at the crowd, rows of unfamiliar faces, flashes, whispers. He could hear his own heartbeat. "I don't have fancy words," he began quietly. "I just wanted to build something good. For people like me, for parents who work 2 jobs and still smile for their kids." He glanced at Mira in the crowd. She beamed, holding the sketchbook she always carried. "When I first dropped a plate in front of her," he nodded toward the CEO with a faint smile, "I thought my life was over. Turns out that broken plate wasn't an ending. It was an opening." A murmur of warmth ran through the hall. Even some of the board members who had doubted him shifted uncomfortably, their expressions softened. The CEO stepped beside him again. "He taught me something I should have known all along. Humility doesn't lower you, it raises everyone around you." She turned to him. "Irman, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you your name back." The applause began quietly, then grew louder, filling the entire hall. The kind of applause that carried not excitement but respect. When it faded, she gestured toward the covered sign behind them. "Before we cut the ribbon," she said, "there's one last change." She pulled the cover away. Beneath it, painted in soft gold, the words gleamed, "Daddy's Dream Cafe." A hush swept through the room. Armin blinked, stunned. Mira gasped, her little hands flying to her mouth. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. He turned to the CEO, voice breaking. "You changed the name?" She nodded. "It was never really mine to name." Mira rushed to the front, the crowd parting as she climbed onto the small platform. Irman crouched, wrapping her in his arms. She whispered, "You did it, Daddy." He shook his head, smiling through tears. "We did." The CEO handed him the ceremonial scissors. "I think you and your partner should do the honors." Father and daughter stood side by side, cutting the red ribbon together as cameras flashed. The crowd erupted in cheers. Behind them, the sign shimmered under the sunlight streaming through the cafe's windows, gold letters glowing against soft pastel walls. The CEO stepped back, watching the moment quietly. For once, she didn't feel the need to control it. This wasn't her story anymore. It was theirs. A journalist pushed forward. "Ma'am, what does this mean for your company? For you personally?" She looked at them calmly. "It means success finally looks like compassion." The audience applauded again, louder this time, not for the corporation, but for the people who refused to stay broken. As the crowd thinned and the speeches ended, she stood by the counter, running her hand along the smooth edge. Armin approached. "Thank you," he said quietly. She smiled. For what? For breaking the silence. He nodded toward the cafe name. She'll never forget this. Neither will I, she said. This place reminded me who I used to be. Mira tugged at her sleeve shyly. You'll come visit, right? The CEO knelt to her level, smiling. I promise. But next time, I'm buying the cupcakes. Mira grinned. Deal. They laughed together, a simple sound but one that carried the weight of everything that had come before. Outside, the ribbon fluttered in the breeze. The cameras packed away, the guests dispersed, and the street grew quiet again. But inside the cafe, warmth lingered, laughter from the kitchen, clinking cups, a child's giggle echoing against walls built from forgiveness. The CEO stood at the doorway, taking one last look. Armin and Mira worked behind the counter, father slicing bread, daughter placing cupcakes in rows, both smiling without realizing it. She whispered under her breath, "This is what power should look like." Then she turned toward the fading light, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since the day a plate shattered in her restaurant, power had finally bowed to humility. And in that surrender, both found something far greater than victory. They found peace. 6 months later, the smell of coffee and freshly baked bread filled the air long before sunrise. The Bridge Cafe, now officially renamed Daddy's Dream, had become a small landmark in the neighborhood. Not because of its design or marketing, but because of the people inside it. Every morning, the same ritual began. Armin would unlock the door before dawn, switch on the lights and stand for a moment in the quiet glow. The cafe breathed with life even when empty. Chairs slightly uneven from laughter, tables etched with tiny scratches that told stories of everyday use. It wasn't perfect. It was alive. Mira sat at her usual corner table scribbling in her sketchbook while waiting for her school van. Add more color to the sign today, Armin reminded her with a smile. Our logo's starting to fade. She giggled. That's because you let everyone touch it. They're touching dreams, he said. Dreams should fade into fingerprints. The cafe had grown far beyond what either of them imagined. It wasn't just a place to eat. It had become a home for people who'd run out of them. Single parents, widows, and struggling growers found jobs here. No resumes, no interviews, just people helping people. Behind the counter, a woman named Farzana brewed tea while her toddler colored beside her. In the kitchen, a young father plated omelets with one hand while texting his babysitter with the other. Laughter mixed with the hiss of steam and the clink of cups. Armin moved among them easily, not as a boss but as a guide. Let the customers feel like guests, he often said, and let each other feel like family. That philosophy had turned Daddy's Dream into something rare, a workplace without fear. At lunchtime, the cafe buzzed with warmth. Strangers shared tables, volunteers served free meals to hospital visitors, and every new customer left with more than coffee. They left with a story. Mira had taken to greeting customers with tiny paper notes that said things like, "You matter today," or "Try the cupcakes, they taste like hope." The idea started as a game. Now, customers waited for them. One afternoon, a journalist returned, notebook in hand. "You've built something extraordinary here," she told Armin. "Do you realize this cafe's become a model for small-scale social businesses?" He smiled shyly. "I just wanted to keep a promise." "What promise?" she asked. He looked toward Mira, who was busy helping a customer find change. "That no one who works for me will ever have to choose between family and survival." The journalist nodded, quietly moved. "And her?" He laughed. "She's the real owner. I just keep the lights on." Across town, the CEO stood by a different window now. Not in her old corner office with the skyline view, but in a small co-working studio overlooking the park. She had resigned 2 months earlier. Her letter had been short and simple. "Leadership without empathy is just management. I'm choosing something better." The board had been stunned. Some even called it a midlife crisis. Rehan, now under investigation, had resigned too, though not by choice. The company survived, but she didn't look back. She now led a small foundation, the Bridge Initiative, focused on supporting single-parent entrepreneurs. Her days were slower, quieter, the kind of quiet that heals rather than haunts. Sometimes during lunch breaks, she'd drive to the cafe and sit anonymously near the window. Armin always noticed, but never made a scene. Their connection had settled into something wordless, mutual understanding, a friendship built on truth. One day he walked over carrying a cup of coffee. "You can't keep hiding," he said. "People will think you're a food critic." She smiled. "Maybe I just like watching success that doesn't need headlines." He sat across from her. You left your throne, he said softly. She shrugged. Turns out it was never a throne, just a very tall cage. He nodded. Freedom looks good on you. Peace looks good on you, she replied. They shared a small laugh, the kind that comes from surviving something together. Mira, now a little taller, walked up to their table, holding a tray of cupcakes. Special flavor today, caramel, cinnamon. Daddy says it's good for forgiveness. The CEO smiled. Then I'll take 2. As Mira skipped back to the counter, she looked at Armin. She's grown, he chuckled. She's growing faster than I can keep up. Yesterday she told me she wants to study design. She'll build more than you ever could, the CEO said. He nodded proudly. That's the plan. Silence settled comfortably between them. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small frame wrapped in paper. I've been keeping this long enough, she said, sliding it across. He unwrapped it. Inside was the original Daddy's Dream restaurant drawing. Perfectly preserved. The same crayon lines that had once fallen from a broken plate now sat beneath glass. I thought you might want it back, she said quietly. It started everything. His eyes softened. You should keep it. It changed you more than me. She shook her head. No, it belonged to Hope, and Hope belongs at home. He looked at the frame for a long time, fingers tracing the glass. It's strange, he murmured. The same thing that embarrassed me once now reminds me I never really failed. That's what healing does, she said. It rewrites the ending. As the afternoon light dimmed, the cafe filled again. Families came in, students studying in corners, soft music floating through the space. A chalkboard by the counter read, "For every meal you buy, one goes to someone who can't afford it." It wasn't a marketing slogan, it was a promise. Mira had added another line beneath it in her careful handwriting. Dreams taste better when shared. The CEO read it and smiled. She's going to change the world. She already changed mine, Armin said simply. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, forgiving rain, the kind that makes everything shine. She stood to leave, pausing at the door. I'm visiting the foundation site tomorrow. We're starting a new program, training single parents in hospitality. Think you could mentor them? He smiled. Only if they promise not to listen to me the way I didn't listen to you. She laughed. Deal. Then, after a moment, her tone softened. Armin, I never said this before, but thank you for trusting me again. He looked at her, eyes steady. You earned it. Weeks passed into months, and Daddy's Dream Cafe became more than a business. It became a community. Local schools partnered with it. Volunteers brought extra food for outreach, and people who once came in hungry started coming in hopeful. One evening they held a small gathering, not an event, just a celebration of gratitude. Former staff members who'd moved on returned, bringing their kids. Laughter filled every corner. When it quieted down, Mira climbed onto a chair with her tiny speech cards. I want to thank everyone, she said proudly, for helping my dad build this dream, and for helping me believe that kindness is stronger than money. The crowd clapped, smiling through tears. The CEO, sitting near the front, wiped her eyes discreetly. Armin leaned against the counter, hand over his heart. Mira added, and this is for Mommy too. Because Daddy says love never really leaves. It just becomes the light we work under. The room went still. For a moment it felt like her mother's presence filled every inch of the cafe, quiet, warm, complete. After the applause, the CEO approached the counter and whispered, "You've done more with this place than I ever did with my company." He smiled. That's because we built it with people, not profit. She nodded. Then keep building. Late that night, after everyone left, Armin locked up the cafe. The streets outside glistened from the rain, reflecting the warm light spilling through the windows. He turned to the framed drawing on the wall, the one she'd returned. Beneath it a small plaque read, "For everyone who's been broken but never stopped serving." He stood there for a while, letting the silence hum. The same silence that once felt heavy now felt sacred. The silence of peace earned honestly. Mira's voice drifted from the back. "Daddy, come on. You'll miss the bus." He smiled. Coming. As they stepped outside, he locked the door, slipping the key into his pocket. The sign above shimmered faintly under the streetlight. Daddy's Dream Cafe. He glanced up at it, whispering softly, "Looks like we made it." Mira slipped her small hand into his. "We didn't just make it, Daddy. We made it right." He laughed quietly. "You're starting to sound like her." "Like who?" He looked toward the horizon, where the city lights met the fading clouds. "Someone who believed in bridges." The CEO returned one final time a few days later. She stood outside, unseen, watching the crowd inside. Parents laughing, children drawing, strangers helping strangers. Her reflection overlapped with the cafe window, and for a fleeting second she saw the woman she used to be, cold, controlled, detached, fade away. She whispered to herself, "This is better than any boardroom." Before leaving, she wrote a short note on a napkin and slipped it under the door. To the man who reminded me that strength isn't loud, it's kind. Thank you for rebuilding what the world forgot to value. Armin found it the next morning, read it quietly, then placed it beneath the frame on the wall. And as the day began, sunlight flooding through the windows, laughter already rising from the tables, one truth echoed through that small cafe. They hadn't just built a restaurant. They had built a legacy of compassion. For her, it was redemption. For him, it was peace. For Mira, it was home. And for everyone who walked through those doors, it was a reminder that the smallest acts, a meal, a smile, a second chance, can heal the biggest wounds. Because sometimes, the greatest architecture isn't made of steel or glass. It's made of forgiveness. The bell above the door chimed softly as the morning crowd trickled in. Daddy's dream cafe looked different now. Bigger, brighter, surrounded by a small garden and a sign that had aged like fine wood. But inside, the spirit was the same: warmth before words, kindness before coffee. Behind the counter stood Mira, no longer the little girl with crayons, but a poised young woman in her late 20s. Her hair was tied loosely, her apron embroidered with the same logo her father once sketched by hand. She moved with quiet confidence, greeting customers by name, laughing easily, her eyes carrying the same light her father once had. The regulars adored her. To them, she wasn't just the manager, she was the heartbeat of the place. On the far wall hung a framed piece of history, the broken plate that had started everything. Inside its cracked white circle, sealed safely under glass, was the old crayon drawing, Daddy's Dream Restaurant. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "From one mistake came 1,000 second chances." Every morning Mira paused in front of it for a moment before opening the cafe. It was her ritual, her way of saying thank you to the past. She would touch the frame lightly and whisper, "We made it, Daddy." Her father had passed away quietly 3 years earlier, peacefully, with a smile. His hands had built the cafe, but his spirit built everything that came after. When people spoke of him, they never mentioned his job title. They spoke of how he listened, how he remembered names, how he turned service into dignity. Mira carried his legacy without trying to fill his shoes. Instead, she walked in his direction. The cafe had expanded into 3 branches now, all run by single parents and their children. The Bridge Foundation, once a dream between her father and the CEO, had grown into a national initiative helping hundreds of families, and through it all, Mira never changed the original motto written on the wall in her childish handwriting: "Dreams taste better when shared." That afternoon, the door opened quietly, and a familiar figure stepped inside. Her hair was silver now, her walk slower, but her eyes still sharp. The CEO, long retired, carrying a small bouquet of white lilies. Mira looked up and smiled instantly. "You kept your promise." The older woman chuckled softly. "I told your father I'd always come back for the cupcakes." They embraced gently, no titles, no formality, just 2 souls bound by a story that had outlived both pride and pain. "I almost didn't recognize you," the CEO said, holding Mira's hand. "You've grown into your father's calm. And your courage," Mira replied. They sat by the corner window, the same spot where Armin used to drink his evening tea. Outside, the street buzzed with life: children running, vendors calling out, sunlight reflecting off car windows. The CEO looked around, her gaze softening. "He really built a home here."
Mira nodded.
"He used to say people didn't come for food, they came for belonging." A waitress brought them coffee, smiling warmly before walking away. The CEO took a sip, closing her eyes. "Still perfect, exactly how he used to make it." Mira smiled. "He taught everyone his little secret, a dash of kindness instead of sugar." They both laughed quietly. On the wall behind them, the framed plate caught a beam of sunlight. The broken cracks glimmered faintly, like lightning frozen in porcelain. The CEO stood and walked toward it. She stared for a long time at the fractures, at the child's drawing, at the memory preserved in silence. "I still remember the sound," she said softly, "that plate hitting the floor. I thought it was the end of something. I didn't know it was the beginning."
Mira joined her.
He said that moment taught him forgiveness isn't a word, it's an action. The older woman smiled sadly. "He forgave me long before I asked for it." She reached out, touching the glass gently, and I've been trying to live worthy of that forgiveness ever since. They stood there together, watching the art that told 1,000 unspoken stories, of failure turned into faith, of shame turned into strength. As the cafe filled with the hum of afternoon chatter, the CEO turned to leave. At the door she looked back one last time. Mira was laughing with the staff, just as her father once did, the same kindness echoing through her every gesture. The CEO smiled, a quiet knowing smile, and whispered under her breath, "You kept the dream alive." Outside the sun began to set, casting long golden lines across the cafe windows. She slipped on her sunglasses, feeling the world slow down around her. Retirement had given her peace, but this place, this cafe had given her redemption. And somewhere, deep in that hum of life, she could almost hear Armin's voice saying, "See? It was never about the plate, it was about what we found inside." Time has a way of softening the sharp edges of memory. We stop remembering the pain, and start remembering the meaning behind it. The sound of a plate breaking once felt like shame, now it sounds like a thane. Because sometimes what breaks us isn't punishment, it's invitation, a way to open us to truth we were meant to share. He taught us that success measured in kindness never fades, that humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom learned through loss, and that the smallest act of compassion can rebuild worlds that power once destroyed. The bridge they built together still stands, not made of steel or stone, but of forgiveness, patience, and shared humanity. As the final customers leave, Mira locks up for the night. She stands in front of the framed plate once more, the cafe quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. She looks up at her father's handwriting still etched faintly on the original menu board. "Be kind, always." She smiles, turns off the lights and steps outside. The street glows under golden lamps. The sign above the cafe door catches the last of the sunlight.
Daddy's Dream Cafe Eston.
She takes a deep breath, the night air cool and full of life. Voiceover closes softly. Kindness outlives us. It travels through hands, hearts, and time until one small act becomes a legacy no storm can erase. Sometimes what breaks us only opens the truth we were meant to share. Tell us where you're watching from, and one word that describes how this story made you feel.